There's two main variables that you need to pull on as a nightclub promoter to squeeze the most out of your promotions team. It took me ages to learn this, but if you're just launching a promotions team, this is a lesson you'd rather learn in 5 minutes with me rather than trying to figure out in 5 months with yourself, because by the time you do learn it, it will already be too late. Because if you don't implement this early, you risk your promotions team running into a death spiral that's really hard to pull them out of, and you might need to scrap the team entirely to bring in a new one. Cool, so if we have a y-axis, which is transparency, or not, and then an x-axis, which is incentive, or not, we want to sit right up here. And I'll explain in a bit exactly what that looks like. Now, really amateur promoter, like managers and team leaders, they'll sit, well, the fucking awful ones will sit down here, which means there's no incentive and there's no transparency, which means literally fucking nothing happens. The incentive is like the bare minimum, so if there's no incentive for them to perform, they're just not gonna do anything, right? But for the most part, you're just gonna ignore that person's messages, you're not gonna fulfill any of their requests, and you're definitely not gonna go above and beyond to see the success, because people are rationally self-interested. Now, if you add incentive, but you don't have any transparency around it, you have unclear expectations. What that means is no one actually knows if they're doing well or not. It also means you don't have any competition. Which I'll tell you a story to make my point. Originally, I just sat like down here when I was like a beginner promoter. I just had really decent incentive. Now mark my words, I can pinpoint the message that I sent where I doubled the performance of my promoter team, and this is what I did. 4 months, I mean probably 2 years, I was tracking every single promoter that I ever had in a Google sheet week by week. How many names they submitted, how many were actually ticked off at the end of the night, and I had data on all of them. And I don't know why I didn't ever share it. I wasn't very transparent. And then one day, I learnt about this stuff, and so I exported just a pie graph of every single promoter that was on the team and how many people they brought that month. I exported it as a PNG image and I just dropped it in the group chat and I didn't say anything. Now all of a sudden everyone knew exactly where they held up and where they stood in the team. They could see if they were a bottom performer, they could see if they were a top performer. If they were close to the top, they could see how far off they were. And here's the other thing. If you have team members that don't get along, which is going to happen in nightclubs, especially if you have a larger team, sometimes you're just going to get 2 people that don't get along. They're going to get ultra competitive. After that happened, I had team members saying, this person stole this person's name from me, this person stole this person's name from me. Promoters were making deals about whose names they would share on their guest list because the competition had just gone through the roof. That means the top performers performed even higher, and the bottom performers, when you have those conversations about, hey, you aren't meeting expectations, it's not a surprise. They don't get angry about it because they already see written on the wall that they're literally the bottom of the team. Now, there's an added thing to this. I mentioned at the start of the video. If you've done this too late, you might go into a death spiral. If you go up here, where you have transparency but no incentive, what actually happens there is everyone realizes and sees how bad the whole team is doing. And if you're in an environment where everyone's losing, it just becomes a death spiral where everyone keeps losing. And so right here in the top right quadrant is where the A players thrive, because they see exactly where they stand up against everyone else, and you've got carrots to try and push them to go further. What this means is the A players, they perform even better, and the bottom, let's call them C players, they get pushed out and self-select themselves out of the team really quickly, so you can replace them with more and more A players that thrive on competition. Now, I want to make one caveat and one important note to incentive. Let's say you have your top performers up here and your bottom performers down here. The difference in reward between your top performers and your bottom performers, it needs to be enough of a gap. So this needs to be significant. And it needs to be a significant difference, because what happens if this is too small, if that difference is too small, what happens is the top performers start thinking, well, why should I work this hard? I barely make any more than these people. And the bottom performers down here, they go, well, there's not much point in me trying much harder because these guys are barely making any more than me. And so you need to stretch a significant difference in the reward received between your top performers and your bottom performers. So if you're looking to build a nightclub promotions team, make sure that you get this right early and you'll set your team up for success and your event for long-term success without needing to rely on too much on like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok advertising, because you'll get the best and squeeze the most out of your A players in your team. So they bring their friends bring their friends, and your effects will compound over time. If you're a DJ or a producer, or you work in nightlife or nightclub promotions, consider subscribing, because I share some of the lessons that are either physically, emotionally, or financially expensive for me on this channel, so that you don't need to repeat all the dumb mistakes I made in my early 20s. I'll see you in the next video.